Welcome to Shining Light Press. You are now watching the Shining Light Press podcast. I'm your host, Freddie Lopez. Today we have a very special guest with us here tonight. He is a candidate for governor of New Mexico. He is also the inventor of, correct me if I'm wrong, is it the Gordon rocket stove?
That's it, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we are going to get into a lot of topics today. We're going to touch on some national issues. We're going to touch on issues affecting New Mexico, and we're going to get started there. So, Mr. Gordon, how are you?
I'm doing well, Freddie. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And I think the folks deserve to know that we took a moment or two to get our technical house in order before we started here, and we're just feeling really good about that. So, and I really appreciate the opportunity because you kind of get thrown into these Zoom meetings and hit the ground running. You don't get to check it out. But so, yeah, we're hitting on all cylinders, we believe.
Absolutely, absolutely. We had a few technical issues, but we're working perfectly. And this is going to be, as you noticed, a lot different from the previous recordings that I did. You notice it was just like he was the camera was aiming at the wall, but now we got a whole new uh shebang going on. We had a whole new thing where you can see us talking. You can now see David Gordon's face, you can see my face, and finally you can at least have something to watch than just something to listen to. So it's going to be real interesting. It's going to be good for everyone. So before we get into the issues, why don't you tell the audience who David Gordon is and why is he running for office?
Well, I got to admit, some mornings I wake up and I wonder that exact question, both of them. Um, it's a very challenging time, as most of us who are observing carefully and apply a critical thinking and analytical skill to what we're given and what is proposed to be the situation at hand. And that's as reflected in the media and so forth. It is a challenging time. I am. So I go back to the "Who's David Gordon" thing. That's a little tough, but I am originally from Golden, Colorado, and worked in television production for many years, and kind of made the transition from analog systems all the way to digital. So that's kind of my professional background, if you will. I worked on systems for character animation. Um, but basically, my background is as a journalist, so I did a lot of documentary type productions, but they're more corporate oriented. Here's our new product, here's our new service, or whatever it might be. So I cut my teeth on that. About it's going like 5 years ago now. Um, I went back to live with my folks in their last years and spent, I guess, about 3 years with them, and they both passed in that time frame. And if if you go to do that, you have to know that you have to stay on site a lot of times because as the folks age, they want to go driving when they shouldn't, and things like that. And and so it was a difficult time in some ways. That's the least of it. But the point being that I couldn't leave, so I had to find ways to work out of home, and it's kind of burnt out on the television production thing. The bottom got cut out of the market in terms of what you can get paid for producing videos, and that changed everything. And I didn't want to form a larger company, but anyway, so I started to work on an invention I'd had in the back of my mind for many years, and that was the Gordon rocket stove. And it's very unique. It actually burns wood. It's like a camping cook stove. We'll take a picture, show you a picture of it here momentarily. But it amazingly, no smoke comes out. And so it was a little ahead of its time in terms of the emergence of rocket stoves, which burn wood but have no uh, visible smoke. In fact, you cannot even smell the wood burning. It's very remarkable. So excuse me, I pursued that as an invention and eventually got a patent. It's fully patented. It's a utility patent, too, importantly, which is to say its basic configuration is for one, it's unique. It's never been done before. No one else has thought of it, certainly. And by its basic proportions, you have to have a look at it to understand it functions as it does. So it's a very, very strong patent, that is to say, it's on the basic form, if you will. So, yeah, I'm an inventor. I have always worked with my hands on mechanical projects and done way more handyman kind of work. And in fact, I kind of fell back to the handyman thing in Santa Fe here as the COVID economy was imposed upon us. It was nice to feel as I would be an essential worker, whereas I'd always not felt so essential. So there's silver lining in a very dark cloud, but that's kind of a nutshell. I'm a television producer, inventor, but I've always put a mind, uh, a careful study, I will say, to politics and leadership skills and, um, needless to say, communications via the television production aspect. And yeah, so why am I running for governor? Well, that's because I have worked on this pretty much my whole life. I have the awarenesses and so forth. Speaking of awareness and the deep study and the research, you might call me a conspiracy theorist, but I would wear that badge very proudly because conspiracy is what there is. We're programmed to trivialize that term, whereas we're talking about criminal conspiracies and very dangerous, dark things. If you really go down that rabbit hole, as they call it, there's no rabbit hole. It's real life. It was just not paying attention to it. So that's my perspective on that. I have a lot of other unique perspectives, but as far as why to run for governor, I think I can be the reconciler between the so-called left and right. I mean, I see that the basic political paradigm as being a false choice. Are we left or right? I believe, in the best instincts of so-called right wing, you'd say that Republican type people want to start businesses and build things and so forth. That's the best instinct of that side of things. To the other side, you might say, at the extreme, not extreme, but you would say, oh, well, social oriented people, Democrats, if you will, they want to take care of people. Those are not two different things. Those are not two different people. Those are instincts, both of which in all of us. You can't take care of anyone until you've built something, and you can't build something without the community to be there to support you. And so I really, I really cross both sides of that extreme that is dialing more and more into an extreme these days. And I resent that. I resist that. And so I think I'm the best person that I've ever met. And if there's somebody better, hey, just let me know and I'll give this up. In all honesty, I've got other things I'd really rather do, but I am well trained for this. I planned on it, and it may be a symbolic run. It may only be me bringing these issues, and hopefully a group will form. And I have some good support already. In other words, we'll put things on the table on the platform. So that's it in a nutshell.
Awesome. Awesome. That sounds very good. And I agree with you when you say that when it comes to politics nowadays, everything seems to be on the extreme, whether it be on the right, whether it be on the left. And there doesn't seem to be much middle ground. There doesn't seem to be like, we agree on this. We disagree on how we can find a solution to this, but we agree that this is an issue and we should work towards that. But unfortunately, that's like non-existent. You don't see
Yeah.
that anymore. Now it's just like this side's better or this side's better and the other side is evil. It's just there's no middle ground anymore. So I think many in New Mexico, especially right now that we're getting off the pandemic, I think many people are going to look at that and be like, you know what? This guy's got the right idea. I think many New Mexicans will see that. And I wanted to get into some issues facing New Mexico. Now, as far as the candidates going challenging our current governor, Michelle Lujan Grisham, we have two Republican opponents. That's Carrie Bedoni. She is Native American. She is on the, I forget which pueblo she is from, but she is from Santa Fe.
Mm.
And we have Jay Block, who is the
Hi.
commissioner of Sandoval County. They both decided to run, but I haven't seen many people report on David Gordon. I guess because I think I'm the only one who's bringing you up. But
I've I've had a little other exposure, but not much, and that brings to mind, the whole challenge. One of the major ones is as a independent candidate, and you don't fit in the mold by definition. You don't have the support of the Republican Party. And you don't have the support of the Democrat Party. And in fact, I got in touch, attempted to, with the Independent Party, but I'm a little too independent for that. And as we describe and discuss the platform, you'll understand why that is.
mhm, yes, and we have touched on several topics before. So, going to get into a few issues facing New Mexico as of right now. Um, Currently, we have currently scandal with the governor of New Mexico. It was reported by the Santa Fe New Mexican that she had paid thousands of dollars to a person, a man who accused her of groping him. And many people are viewing that as very unethical. People are viewing that as very controversial. And not only that, she is also currently, it was reported by John Block of the PinonPost.com, and he filed an ethics complaint after it came out that not only this, but also that Michelle Lujan Grisham had paid her daughter in campaign funds and illegal campaign contributions. And now the New Mexico Ethics Commission is investigating Michelle Lujan Grisham on ethics violations. So right now there's a big uh, issue when it comes to ethics in the when you're running for office, whether you be at the state level or at the federal level. So if you're governor, how are you going to build trust and build accountability and ethical behavior in office?
Well, it'll be the touchstone of my administration that it's just completely transparent. In fact, so transparent it'd probably be embarrassing at some point. And I my, I've always envisioned this, and it's kind of a crazy thought, but I think a lot of my activities and the activities around what I do will be broadcast almost constantly. Day to day events, meetings with whomever. And that does two things. One, it, it takes out the possibility of corruption. I mean, it's one of my campaign slogans, if you will, that I have no experience in politics. And that's to say, I have no experience in graft or self dealing or abandoning my constituents in the worst crisis that's ever existed. Backing up a little bit to the accusations against MLG, it's a tempest in a teapot. Those things are so immaterial compared to the bigger picture of what has happened to our economy unnecessarily. Um, I run pretty deep on this in terms of research and in terms of my associations, you might say. I am a lead plaintiff, a named plaintiff on the federal lawsuit regarding what we distinctly consider to have been a medical hoax. And that's a very challenging thing to say, but the evidence bears it out. And folks, if you're not ready for that, you're not ready for anything. And I think we have to toughen up and get real, and there are a lot of folks behind what I suggest here. Uh, the main lawsuit is through an attorney named Anna Garner, and we'll leave some connection to the lawsuit and so forth, but it suggests very specifically, based on the publications of the pharmaceutical companies and the CDC and NIH and Johns Hopkins and others, that first of all, the PCR test was a complete useless element. Everyone tested positive because they would amp up. At least one suggestion is they amped up the replications of it to 40 times, where it should be no more than 25. And even that, the developer of the PCR test said, don't use it to analyze whether you have a disease or not. You can analyze DNA strands or whatever you would do with it, but it just suggests that there is infection when there is not. There's deeper questions and pictures yet in terms of the veracity of actually understanding what a virus is and how they function, and whether things on that so-called microscopic level even exist, because you really will not find a lot of SEM or scanning electron microscope photography of these things. Everything you've seen is an illustration. It's a painting, an animation, flying orange and blue things with spikes coming off of them. So that's the basis of the lawsuit, into which I am a plaintiff, as I have had my Gordon Rocket Company business destroyed by not being able to freely travel outside the state for commerce. So it's a violation of the Interstate Commerce Clause. It goes to some other particular constitutional issues. But then so do I. I mean, I have been on the plaza for the last 8 weeks. I missed a couple. One was too cold, and the other time we went down to Backstreet Grill for their demonstration of the right to live and breathe freely. And that's ensconced in a couple different aspects of the Bill of Rights. The 14th Amendment is actually involved in the 4th. It's not quite a named thing to be able to breathe, but on the other hand, I think it's essentially a human right, and it's given by God, and it can only be taken away by government. And so when they give us our rights back by saying, oh, now you don't have to wear a mask if you're fully vaccinated, I just say a bunch of hokum. It's just immaterial. We are free. And now I do respect, and I've mentioned this to many people, going into an establishment that's a private business. Totally respect that, because if they have the requirement that you wear a pink shirt, they can say that. I have the right to refuse business. Everyone has that right. That's not actually in the Constitution per se either, but the point being that if they say wear a mask, I'll wear a mask. And out of common courtesy, I'll wear a mask. And on March 20th, addressing the police officers, I wore my mask and kind of queried them on, what laws are we violating? And they said, well, there's a state law, and then there's a mandate in the city. And I said, well, so tell me this. So I walk out of my house, and I'm supposed to have on this alleged medical device just to walk, when I walk out of my door, around in the world with no one around? And he said, well, yes. And I said, no, that's where we draw the line. Me and these people over here, and there's about 50 of us that day on March 20th, we will not do that. And he said, well, you're under threat of imminent arrest or citation. And I'm like, okay, we're not going to do it. And then we talked a little more about some parameters. Again, I wear my mask to speak with them, and some other things along those lines. And then he said, Mr. Gordon, I must say, and this was Officer Ortiz, I believe. Yeah, Ortiz. And he said, we really appreciate you and your people here having a peaceful demonstration. I said, well, officer, we're old. Peaceful is about the best we can muster. And so that kind of, if I have a skill, that's kind of it right there. It's to be a reconciler and find the common ground. And sometimes it takes humor. It always takes humor, trust me, because that's how you keep yourself going in such crazy circumstances. But it broke the ice, and it wasn't just me and Officer Ortiz or two other officers to either side, and there are four more behind him. One in fatigues, ready to tack up or do whatever they thought they were going to do. But we weren't the threat they thought we might be. It was just the absurdity of it. Sorry, little computer thing there. Um, anyway, so I kind of jumped around a bit, but I think that's kind of who I am, more so.
That's a good segue for us to get into the pandemic. And many have argued that what we have seen in defense to prevent the spread of COVID 19, they have locked everyone down. You could not go to work, you could not go outside, and you could only go outside if for essentials, basically, if you need to go to the doctor, if you need to get some food, things like that. And then once that stopped, now you have restrictions. Only so many people can go into a building. You have to wear a mask. And even though the CDC changed their guidelines to saying, well, you're now fully vaccinated, you can no longer wear a mask, yet most states are most states are still have mask mandates, and they still have many restrictions. And there are many people who have questions about this pandemic. Some say, oh, if you ask questions, you don't believe in the pandemic. Well, there are questions to be asked. Many on one side feel that there's a lot of questions that haven't been answered, and many people believe that what you described, that it's a hoax. So as governor, how are you going to address this? How are you going to address the people who are scared, who feel that if they don't walk out with a mask, that they could they could kill someone, or they could kill themselves? And how do you explain to the people who say, how are you going to answer these questions? We want answers. We want to, as you say, live and breathe freely.
Yeah.
How are you going to do that as governor and balance everything like that out?
Well, there's a lot of fear mongering with anything like this, and there's that. I was all worried about, killing Grandpa until I realized I am Grandpa, and I'm doing fine. There's not bodies on the streets. There's very few people know somebody that has been affected by it. So, but even if that's the case, and I accept that there is a COVID thing, and apparently it was engineered in the Fort Detrick military lab and shipped not only to Wuhan and funded by Fauci to the tune of some $7 million, which actually doesn't sound like a lot of money, but that money is worth 10 times or more of that over there. Plus, you had other input to it too. So they did the gain of function. So the disease that is made from bat viruses that they went around in caves, actually all over the world. I forget the other one. It's in Soviet state of Georgia, the ex-Soviet state, Tbilisi. Anyways, they're doing bat studies there. They're doing them in Wuhan. Anywhere there's bats. You see, if you go into a bat cave, just with unaided, without an apparatus, if you're a caving person, you stand a real good chance of getting deathly ill because of the viruses there. So they used the bat virus in combination with other ones to gain the function on the bat virus to see what would happen if some evil scientist somewhere did that and unleashed it on the humans. What would the CDC and the NIH and the WHO, WHO, what would they do? Well, they're the evil scientists that released it. This is a known thing. Um, and I'm sorry it's such radical notion for most people, but it's either that you're either a conspiracy theorist or you're a coincidence theorist, and it takes immense uh, numbers of coincidences and chance beyond all possibility of happening for this to occur naturally. So it didn't. And then these are the same people that offer the cure, and they have a sorry, it's an experimental uh, DNA modification thing. It carries spike proteins. It's got P, what's that? Polyethylene glycol, PEG, in it. And I don't know, they take all the worst shit on earth and stick it in a shot and they jab it in you. And this is the nature of medicine as it's been imposed upon us. And that's why it's actually easy to solve this problem, because as governor, I don't have to do actually anything. I just have to stop doing stupid things. And so it's far easier. And obviously, there's some things to do too. We'll talk about that more. But in all honesty, right now, and here's the thing, and you touched on this, where only the vaccinated people can go to a sporting event or fly in airplanes or something. Suddenly, you're creating a division between various aspects of humanity that's insurmountable. We'll have vaxxers against anti-vaxxers. Well, and speaking of vaxxers, those people who got the injection can no longer give blood. The blood supply depends on people like me now. You cannot give plasma, even plasma, much less your blood type and however that works. But this is a disaster on so many levels, and it's so irrational that anyone who thinks I'm a crazed conspiracy theorist, I'm actually an accurate criminal conspiracy theorist. And I will demonstrate that in the future as we go forward. We have a year and a half and a little bit till the election, so there's a lot to be accomplished. We haven't even talked about the whole electoral system, which we have to rebuild from scratch, going back to paper ballots, on and on and on. So that's me as an inventor, to consider these things, and child welfare and education. We will no longer be the last stupidest state in America. I guarantee you that. Give me 1 year and we'll at least be the 25th. Well, that'd be half. So we'd be the 12th worst state in a year, I guarantee you. And on up from there, because it's all so simple. There are blockades and blockages, whether, getting to the crux of my administration, which will be developing a public bank, our bank. And so when we'll be based on our own gold standard, it'll be a gold backed solid currency for use in the state. And we'll hypothecate that in our own state bank and give ourselves loans. And then that money comes back into the bank when we make more. And there'll be certainly a Bitcoin styled cryptocurrency attached and fairly traded and easy payments. And we'll refinance the big tsunami that's coming is the foreclosures and the folks who are currently have their loans in abeyance and all the folks that haven't paid rent for a year. You can be thrown out of your apartment at any time. The CDC no longer has its pseudo hold on that. Maybe it's still on, but it doesn't matter. It'll go off. And then the landlords that own those apartments that haven't been paid, they're in abeyance. Abeyance doesn't mean it's forgiven. It means that, well, we just didn't make you pay, but they can drop the hammer on those notes at any time and wipe out half of the homes and half of the economy and put everybody on government welfare overnight. Which, if you get to the crux of what the hell that is, that's instant overnight communism. And y'all thought it couldn't happen here. Well, this is what it looks like. So that's kind of me. You see why the independent party doesn't like me. I'm a little too independent.
There are a lot of people who are independent, and there are a lot of people who just don't want to be beholden to either side. So I understand that. So, and that's another good segue, because this state has been controlled by one party, the Democratic Party, for generations. And I believe the last time the state legislature technically, at least at the state house, has gone, I guess you could say, red or Republican, was back in 2015 to 2016 and very early 2017. But what happened is, and the state Senate, that hasn't been Republican for since the early 1900s. So if you are successful in your run, you would be the very first independent governor since Jesse Ventura in the 90s when he was governor of Minnesota.
What about Gary Johnson?
Gary, jo- Gary Johnson there too. You know, even though
Yeah.
he was a Republican, he
So I
was,
do have a precedent.
yes. If
And I think
Gary,
he was sort of a dark horse candidate too. I mean, I'll be coming out of nowhere and a populist, which means you're popular, which means folks want to vote for you. What's wrong with populism? And what is wrong with it is that the elite that think they know better than us how to do everything for us and control us and hand us a welfare check, even though we were successful business people a month prior, they just they really just don't want competition. They don't want a person like myself to be successful with my invention. And that's a whole nother story, but it's just bewildering to me that a life-saving, world-changing, energy positive, for that matter, greenhouse positive, it uses wood at a level of 15 times more efficiently. That's unprecedented, unheard of. It's bizarre. They don't want that. That's the problem. You know how I said that the Republicans want to build things and the Democrats want to take care of people? Well, I'm halfway between. I build things to take care of people. And that's, for instance, my stove. That's my whole orientation for my entire life. I help people a lot because I can, because I have the abilities to do so. I have a raft of capabilities. I could, I could be a yacht captain. I have my captain's license at any time. I've got the experience. Um, I worked with horses, dangerous ones, a lot at a certain point. So, it's and then so here's the thing: to find the balance between what we think are extremes. There's no extremes, even between the vaxxed and the unvaxxed. I say to hell with all that notion. Let's just get back to normal. And if you think, hey, if you want to be more careful because you know, immune system is challenged or something, well then wear your mask. Nobody's going to harass you anymore. And then that's important to me, that we just reconcile. Yeah, it's like there's a great quote by a Native American. Forgive me that I don't know. It's been said Chief Seattle, but I've heard not. But he said simply, "Let us put our heads together and build a better world for our children." That's my campaign platform, and the rest of it is just trivial stupidness. Other than that, it's politics in the sense of self-serving, or they say, oh, it's politics. Well, that means that someone is taking advantage of someone somehow. So no more of that.
and I wanted to get back to things about New Mexico, and you have a very common sense platform that many people are attracted to, find common ground and things that would work. Now, as far as things happens with New Mexico, I have brought it forth to you in several interviews, past interviews, but I wanted to talk about this is that we have we are one of the states that have the highest amount of regulations and highest amounts of taxes. We have, whether it be the state income tax, whether it be the gross receipts tax, whether it be the capital gains tax, we are one of the biggest states that have that, and many people argue that that stunts economic growth because most of the money is going towards the government and not towards the people for the economy to get bigger. While the other side argues that, well, these taxes are for help the government to get revenue and help keep the uh, I guess you could say what you call the status quo going. So on that particular issue, when it comes to taxes, what's your position on that?
Well, if we initiate the state bank, there won't be any taxes. We'll make money from that. So start with that. State bank, I'm sorry, it's also a public bank and also known as a people's bank. It actually goes full spectrum around the whole political spectrum. If you think about the more left communistic side, they're going to want a government bank, and over on the far, let's say, right wing and libertarian side, they want um, independence from, maybe the libertarian's not quite right, but to the Republican point, they want a bank that's not owned by foreign interests, or at least they used to not want that. So, how do you reconcile that? We have our own bank, and the details of that and how to do it, they're pretty worked out. Uh, I don't want to go too far on that because it's going to be really unpopular. Basically, that's what they killed Kennedy for, was getting out from under the international banking cartel, which for us is the Federal Reserve, which of course is not federal, nor is there any reserve. And so just one of the many falsifications. But I think what we're looking at to resolve that is a truth and reconciliation type situation. Basically, we forgive them and they stop doing evil, stupid stuff. And so I think it serves whomever has been part of this intentional pandemic and the economic ripple effects, not only statewide, not only nationwide, but worldwide. Uh, we just got to let it go and move on and do better. And so there are some deep, deep issues involved. And I'm not sure I answered the gist of your question, Freddie. If you wouldn't mind repeating, did I cover your question there?
You covered the question pretty well, but if you feel that you need to elaborate more, I can. So the question was, how do you propose, because we have high taxes here in New Mexico. How do you
Oh yeah,
suppose? Yeah,
taxes. Sorry,
yeah.
sorry. Of course.
Mhm.
Let me address that. Well, first, yeah, I kind of got excited because there won't be any state tax um, on anything, um, and whatever the taxes are, they will be vastly lowered, even if it's not quite that. Corporate tax, let's put it in line with everything else. I did not realize that the taxes were allegedly higher in this state, and there's ideas that we should tax the wealthy more. It's certainly got to be, again, it doesn't, I can't affect the federal tax. I can affect a lot of the federal payments we think we're going to have to make, but we won't anymore. Um, but the state tax, yeah, just assume it's gone. Like Texas, we'll be so productive on so many levels that it won't even matter anymore. And so, yes, with the state bank, I keep saying state because it would be, but it's a public bank. With public banking, we have so much free money that we'll have universal education to the ability of a student. Whether they want to be a doctor or a brain surgeon, we'll have the facilities and it'll be free. And then, but they'll have to work in a clinic or a hospital or whatever it might be to sort of pay for that, if you will. So universal health care then follows for that very reason. There's reasons that you pay $14 for a 30-cent box of Kleenex in the hospital, and we will get rid of those reasons too. And so healthcare will be very cheap. We'll have local clinics that start with the basics of things for free. And then if it's more complicated, they go to a county hospital. If it's more complicated, maybe a state institution for an extreme cancer case. But we will never have to have a bake sale so a kid can have cancer treatment, period, ever again. And we can have bake sales. That's probably great. But no one will lack. It's that simple. It's actually very, very easy. We just have to get the less than human interested players off the field.
And, and I also wanted to talk about New Mexico. We also have a major crime problem, particularly in Albuquerque. We have
Yeah.
had major crime spikes in a very long time, and many people are saying that when it comes to the police, many people feel like the police should be quote unquote defunded, while the other side believes that they shouldn't be defunded, in fact, refunded. And we're seeing the consequences of this movement. Many police officers have said that they'll just resign, and many officers have resigned because they feel like they're getting respect they deserve to fight combat crime.
Right.
So, my question to you is, how do you plan to address the rapid crime in New Mexico, not just in Albuquerque, but just the state as a whole?
Well, with the economy devastated, and I don't know to the extent that there may have been a widespread prisoner release that wasn't publicized that I knew of here in New Mexico, but certainly elsewhere for COVID ethical reasons or something. Whereas it's probably the safest place they could be, according to the science. Um, Crime goes away when there's opportunity, better opportunities. I know a lot of it's desperation crime, I'm sure. There's certainly the influence of the drug distribution, drug cartels. I think a lot of that's going to go away with the legalization of marijuana, such as it has been. I'm a libertarian in terms of what people do with themselves and their bodies, so we'd have to investigate. And see, here's the thing. Sorry, I'm jumping around, but it comes down to asking the people on the ground what we should do. The police officers, for instance, some people say to defund them. Some people say to do better this. I say better training offhand, more training, higher pay, better skills, make it a very special job and win back the respect they deserve, more community involvement. I mean, has anyone had much of a interaction with a police officer other than a negative one? And I haven't had any negative ones for a while, but the point is, they are just people like us that are brave and going out there and taking care of some very serious business sometimes and some very humanitarian crises. I mean, we got the whole homeless thing going on, but and more so all the time. Um, so I say, ask the people on the ground, ask the police what we should do. I say, ask the criminals what we should do, for that matter. Um, you know, they have motivations. There's, the influx of folks coming over the border and the very challenging situations about that. The unaccompanied children, who I assume are more or less farmed in Central America, and then they're brought up here with minimal human interaction and used to get people across the border, then abandoned sometimes, and it's just hellish. Uh, Defending New Mexico's border will be a priority. We have to do it ourselves, but again, I'm not going to figure out what to do. The people doing it are going to figure out what to do. Then my job would be develop the administration behind it to fulfill what they think is the best idea. And then maybe there's another idea that's a little different. We should try that one too. We should experiment. That's how you solve problems, is you try things. And first thing you do is try something different in all respects, because bottom line, we're in last place as far as our students. So that says there's a lot of mistakes, a lot that need to be fixed.
I believe this is a great segue to go in terms of the border crisis. And I wanted to mention something about the border. It was reported that Congresswoman Yvette Harrell of New Mexico sent a letter to the governor asking for the National Guard to be deployed at the border to combat the surge in uh, illegal immigrants coming over. However, and it was a very, very strange response. The governor's press secretary responded saying Yvette Harrell should take her concerns to the federal
Hmm.
government.
Right, right. Yeah, the state throws it to the feds throws it to the state, and they both avoid the issue while people are trafficked in for profit. Um, an alarming factor of that is that supposedly they're not vaccinated as they come across, which I think is great. I wouldn't recommend it. But yeah, whereas our population is being vaccinated, which I find detrimental. So it's almost like they're protecting a replacement population. I know that's a very, very controversial statement, but what else could be going on? What will we do with these tens of thousands of children who have no family, no home, and now they're thrown into this country? What are the programs behind that? That's where we need to step up and largely take over. There's nothing to take over, there's nothing happening. Just do the right thing on a state level, take care of those kids. The other folks that are healthy and so forth, they just got to go back. And I think then the larger picture is solve problems in foreign countries so they're not so inclined. I mean, there's just so much. Um, it comes down to cognitive dissonance. We're told that we're this horrible white supremacist, I gotta laugh, it's hilarious, racist country, yet all these people want to come here. And that's a funny side topic, but you hear these stupid things now and systemic racism. Well, this country elected a supposedly black president twice. I voted for Barack Obama twice, and I had hope for change. It didn't turn out that way, and we learned a lot about how things really work. But yeah, it's as far as the border and solving that. It's We ask the people on the ground, and in all cases, we ask the people on the ground, whether they're teachers or border patrol or police. That's, as I see it, my job. And other people's job. Needless to say, I'm not going to do it all myself, but that's what we do. We find out what the people who are doing the job think we should do, and we help them do it. How's that?
That's a good idea. So,
It's so
yeah,
simple, really.
yeah.
You lose the arrogance and start, you know, being a servant of the people, an actual public servant. So, and I take pride in that term. I think most so-called public servants don't like to be called public servants anymore.
Exactly. It's exactly. I think many people feel that way.
Yeah.
and and I also wanted to mention this one also as well. We touch a little bit on national issues, and we'll get back to the state issues. In terms of nationally, there is a recently the House had passed a bill that would commission a 9/11 style commission to investigate what was the cause or what happened on January 6th with the riot at the state capitol. And excuse me, I just had to have a drink of water there. But well, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think that this is a good idea, or because one side is arguing that this could happen again, we need to figure out how this happens so we could prevent it, while the other side is arguing, yes, it happened, it was a bad thing, and but we already know what to do if it happens again. We need to move on. So, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm of two minds. I think it's an overreaction. We should just let it be water under the bridge, like most everything. On the other hand, it does need some examination. There's no question. If it is to be examined, well, we got to bring in both sides of the story. There's accusations that there were 220 some Antifa uh, agitators, and I know I saw contractors, and contractors are military, industrial mercenaries that do other things too. The history of false flags everywhere is one of those conspiracy theory things that you're not supposed to pay attention to, but you sure as hell should, because that's how they control the narrative. That's how they make you think the way you do. And I forget the guy's name. He was like a pro skater or an Olympic skater, and then he happened to film the shooting of Ashley Babbitt. And you can watch. videos that are taken from different angles on that whole thing, and it aligns with a lot of other false flags. Who knows what the real details are because they're hidden and obfuscated, excuse me. And the guy with the horns. Uh, there's a new video out where he is yelling to everybody, "Okay, they're going to let us in if we be calm and nonviolent." And the cops are the Capitol Police, so they're negotiating with um, professional agitators. And again, you can just tell if you know what to look for. It's pretty scripted. And so that's an unfortunate thing. So yes, I'd say investigate the hell out of it if it's going to be an open discussion, but it won't be. So that's why I say I would think people say, no, let's not do this. It'll just be another witch hunt. And, they restrict which testimony can be given. It gets all messy and political and infighting. Offhand, I'd say let's forget about it and move on and worry about the suicide rates of children in New Mexico.
Exactly. That is a great segue. That is actually a great segue to talk about that, because New Mexico, as of right now, we have the highest, what should I say, one of the highest suicide rates among children here. And I I cannot remember the exact details, but it was reported by Kale before that a young child, a young child committed suicide because the schools were closed and he wasn't able to interact with his friends. And Michelle Lujan Grisham has yet, even, and this was months ago, and she has yet to respond to this. A
That's what
lot
we
of
have.
things.
That's the
Yeah,
kind of, I don't know, there's this arrogance that runs through the vein of all folks currently in any position of authority whatsoever. And this distance and this lack of accountability. And it's like court cases being thrown out without being heard. What's this common thread through all of that? Conspiracy, yeah. Conspiracy only means that more than one person got together and decided to do a criminal act. The word criminal gets left off of that. And again, conspiracy gets trivialized. It's like, oh, that's just conspiracy. Well, that's to say a whole new use term of the word, which makes no sense, that it's frivolous. Oh, that's just frivolous thought. No, this is criminal conspiracy theory, like the one that killed Kennedy and the weird situation around 9/11 and on and on and on and on. Folks, you're just going to have to get used to it. Sorry.
yes, and there's another issue here when it comes to New Mexico is we have a. This is an interesting question. It could be not just New Mexico, but basically a national issue. There are many people in New Mexico that are big believers in what you would call, I guess you could say, big government over small government when it comes to issues facing New Mexico, whether it be crime, whether it be what's going on at the border, when it comes to literacy rates, whether it comes to um, just many things affecting New Mexico. And we haven't improved all these years. We're low in the numbers. How do you convince, when it comes to the election cycle, convince voters to say, listen, the best solution is not more government, but less government? How do you propose that to voters?
Well, I think that's inevitably the case. The way we do that is dishire a lot of folks in the current government because on the list of many things, New Mexico is last. So whatever we've done up to this point, and whatever mechanism has imposed, you're referencing the long-standing hold on New Mexico that the Democratic Party has had. It's not the Democratic Party; it's Dominion voting systems. It's absolutely corrupt. We cannot have black box voting. Even if that wasn't the case, You still can't have black box voting. And that's to say, black box, a device into which your vote goes, and you can't touch it or see it or whatever, and then out comes a result. It's just absurd. Jimmy Carter, to his credit, um, only would allow in-person voting in these foreign countries where he was doing his social works later in his after his presidency, which I found commendable. But the number one thing that old Jimmy Carter said was paper ballots. And so we have to rebuild the electoral system house to house, street to street, precinct to precinct. And there's some ideas about how to do that. Again, paper ballots, but my mantra on that is vote early and vote often. And that sounds silly, but it's to help remind us that what we could do is have surveys and polls, if you will, of course, but on a whole bunch of different ones. And what's everybody thinking about this? I think we do a lot of referendums, but if we, even building up to the 2022 election, we have to rebuild now from scratch with no mechanical devices involved. Simple humans counting votes, one from each party and another a neutral representative, and whatever camera oversight for each voting reveal where you take the votes that have been handed to you, physical ballots, and you check off what they say. We can easily do that, and better to involve the human capital and pay them than pay millions to a company that offshores the tabulation. That in the case of Arizona, the folks running the election didn't have the administrative admin access to the devices or the computers. So they didn't control the election. Dominion did. Dominion and its minions, which are widespread somehow. Our votes were tabulated in Germany and Spain or somewhere, and this is not conjecture. This is known. This is from Dominion's own information. So it's not. You don't have to look that far afield to find conspiracy. It's right there in plain view. It's one of the conspiracy jokes, but it is. They hide it in plain view because you're not looking in plain view. You're going, oh, what's on TV tonight? And I don't blame you, but it's time we find the drama in real life and the challenges in real life, not on someone else's football field or some projected, conflict or challenge or war on the other side of the planet. We have to start at home, and then we'll work from there.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to briefly say, just off topic, that you're very dark. It's very dark.
I know. The sun went down on me. I look like a floating head from space. So. Sorry, folks. I'm not that weird, but it's just a lighting thing. Let's see if we can get some more. Yeah, the sun went down and turned my whole world dark.
Yeah,
it happens every night.
Yeah, that's okay. I think I can see you a little bit better, but still, okay. All right, so I think we've got a few more questions to go to. So
sure. In fact, hold on one sec. I'm going to turn on a light so it's not so spooky.
Okay, no problem. And
there's a certain old episode of Star Trek where a guy's just like a floating head. I was starting to look like that.
Yeah, it's real bright where I'm at. It's like a,
Well, your monitor could be bright. I think it's pretty balanced, but now my gray hair is shining. I look like Jenner or something. Anyways.
Anyway, so I get to a few more questions, and the question I also want to bring up is what's going on as of right now worldwide, and most specifically, what's going on right now in the Middle East. And you have a long-standing conflict, and as of right now, the Israel has agreed to a ceasefire with Hamas in Gaza. And there are a lot of people who are saying that we never saw this under the prior administration, these type of attacks on one of our allies in the Middle East. And now we are seeing this happen, and many people are thinking that this ceasefire is not going to last too long. So my question to you is, what are your thoughts on that whole situation? And do you have any other thoughts on how the administration is vastly different from the prior administration, at least on this particular issue?
Yeah, well, that's a world away, and it's not the purview of the governor, of course. Interesting, though, where that does kind of crisscross is that the governor of the state is the commander in chief of the National Guard of that state, and those people are serving overseas. So there is, and I have to like fully, I mean, that's kind of an inside thing. I don't know the exact parameters of that, but those are easily found out. Um, so to comment on the Palestinian situation, I mean, I have my sympathies uh, to both sides of the question. Somehow, more or less, during the Trump 4 years, there wasn't this activity going on. I think, on the national level, those so-called leaders need to figure out what that was and do that. And I think there has been a little bit of, uh, sorry, just something different than the outright resistance to the prior Trump arrangement there. In other words, they're coming back to whatever Trump was doing a little bit, but it really wasn't Trump. And maybe it was. Maybe he pushed a few buttons and twisted a few arms, or offered sanctions on one level, or encouragement on another, or payments to whomever. But this is an age-old conflict. But apparently, there are times when it doesn't happen. So let's, on that level, I could only beg those national leaders to figure out a better path, do the best thing for the children. There are deeper, darker elements to all this. There are folks who want that conflict on both sides. There are folks that stimulate that conflict. There are agitators. There are agents provocateurs. There are false flags. There are false events. There are false narratives. There are false everything. The first casualty of war is the truth, of course. And so, whatever you hear, you just take it with a massive bucket of salt for starters, not a grain. And but the bottom line is that the people on the street, chances are they don't want this at all. 99% of people just literally want to have a life and make a better world for their children. So where that got off the track, and then the whole, how is it that the Democrat Party went from anti-war to pro-war? How did they go from anti-corporate to pro-corporate? How did they go from anti-establishment to pro-establishment? And are they really? I think their so-called leaders are, but the people, by and large, they're not extreme. And they may be leaning a little left and saying, hey, let's take care of people, or a little right, hey, let's build business. But it's really just the same humans doing the same process worldwide, and it's clearly uh, a very negative clique, an elite, the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about, the one that killed Kennedy because he didn't want to engage in Vietnam, and um, that whole Bay of Pigs fiasco, and so certainly I'd be a voice to be anti-war. I mean, totally anti-war. It's never solved any problems. And what are we? And I do appreciate the service of people involved to their country, but it's not defending America to help destroy Bosnia, or Iraq, or Syria, or anywhere. It's not defending America to be anywhere else but on the borders of this country, defending America. That's where America is.
Mhm. All right, so I'll get to a couple last issues on New Mexico. And you had actually mentioned something when it comes to the states, because in our prior interview, you have mentioned the answer is within the state.
Oh yeah,
Hmm.
well, the answer's in the room,
Yes. Hmm.
and it's a big room.
Yes, and you are correct in many ways because just recently the governor of Iowa signed a law basically banning mask mandates in cities, in schools, and almost everywhere.
Yeah.
And she's not the only one.
Right.
Texas has done it. Florida has technically done it too. South Dakota, many states have all done this, but many states, whether it be California, Oregon, Colorado, many of these states have maintained their restrictions. And even our state, we went into a second lockdown. So, so as governor, when it comes to overreach by the federal government, because many people are worried that this administration is going to go over the line, how would you, as governor, say, this is what we're going to do? We're not going to let you impede on our affairs, essentially like that.
Well, just straight up, there's going to be far less federal intrusion upon our affairs. And again, we look to our local experts. A certain school, maybe a school has a spike of illness, which is unlikely because children aren't affected by COVID. Good reason not to vaccinate them. Of course, it's not a vaccine; it's an experimental mRNA messenger delivering shot full of garbage to make you sick. Turns out. And that's a radical notion, but folks, that's the world. So again, just get used to it. I mean, either now or you're going to be a victim of it. So yeah, answers in the room. It's answers in the state. Let's put our heads together and figure out the best path forward. You have to look at some weird stuff too, like the hospitals have been abandoned. Although it was looking more active today as I drove by, the parking lot was fairly full, so that's positive. A lot of these hospitals have laid off staff during this crisis because it wasn't that busy, and there is no rise in the overall death fatality numbers overall. It's not like there's a big wave of COVID deaths. They basically replaced the flu deaths, which I think are amped up anyways. But so the solutions will come. And that's why I'm very confident that I'm appropriate here, because I'm not saying I have all the answers. I say I put together the task force to go get the answers. A big issue that I think is going to be very crucial, and it even is now, is water in the state. We have to look into deep, deep drilling. People worry about replenishing the aquifers, so they're going to cut down the productivity of the Rio Grande Valley to recharge the aquifer. Well, great. So what are you going to do with the recharged aquifer? Well, you'd use that for farming. Uh, well, why not just farm this year anyways? But we have to find better water sources. There's such a thing as primordial or prehistoric almost water, uh, extremely pure. It's only deep and it's there. It's actually pressurized in a lot of cases. Some of it's hot. So these have been simple solutions that have been ignored or overridden by vested interests. Um, number one, two is number one, two. One of the top priorities then is to quit releasing so much water out our only river almost. The Rio Grande, it's just emptying those reservoirs, Abiquiu reservoirs, down to nothing for no good reason. I don't think we should be sending all our water somewhere else. We should be using it for our own productivity. An infrastructure program dovetails with that, where we bring better, cheaper power to the small towns so they can create industry. And that is one of the abominable lacks in this state. That's why I say we are forced to live under what is an austerity program, where, and especially now, the whole basis has been cut out from under small business. Fortunately, as we initiate a public bank, we'll be able to re-support that and solve all those problems, and that's going to come down in the next while. And then if the election actually does happen, assuming we get some traction with the paper ballot movement, let's call it that, the real voting systems, the legitimate ones, the simple ones, we might all end up with a blue or red or purple thumb, having voted that day, that at that place, and so forth. Again, we're going to pre-vote. We're going to understand the will and the gist of what people feel. They call it the zeitgeist. Is that what is the spirit of the times? What do we think? Should we do this? Should we do that? Bring things to debate, discussion, open discussion, not these closed city council. Maybe people get 3 minutes to talk. We'll just reboot all of that. And exactly how I do that, well, that's another story. But it's that speaks to kind of the more taking on the corruption thing, and that'll be uh, very interesting. Again, conducted under transparency on all levels. So that's kind of the vision. We fix problems. We address them individually. We look at the almost from an engineering standpoint. That's how I look at things. How do we fix it? We need more people, get more people. We need more of this, get more of that. We need less something, get less. So you just keep adjusting. And since it's so imperfect already that we're the worst state in the union on so many levels, I don't know all the others, but if there's a couple, three, it's sad. We won't be anymore. We'll fix all that. It's just, we just get the idiots out of the way. It's that simple.
Speaking of the union, just this morning, there were, I believe, five counties in the state of Oregon that they voted on a ballot question. They voted to secede from Oregon and
Oh,
join their
wow.
neighboring state of Idaho. While
Yeah.
and even though it's many people are saying it's a long shot, because what this vote does is it goes to the county commissioners, and the county commissioners have to decide, yes, we do want to leave. It goes to the state legislature in
Wow.
Idaho and
Yeah.
Oregon and the Congress, things like that. And when you're seeing things like this, many counties that feel like our state has basically ignored us, we want to join this state. What do you think? Where do you think New Mexico is in that arena?
Well, we're certainly not ready to succeed. It's where we are at that stage is, first going beyond the standard paradigm, going beyond the austerity program. Excuse me, backing up, the standard paradigm is left right conflict. No, the only conflict is what to do for the kids and who's best to do it and what's the method. So it's kind of a double-headed, two-edged sword, I guess, if you will. But we have to. Well, that says it cuts you. That's a bad metaphor. But in other words, we have to just find the best ideas on the ground with the right people and get the best ideas going. And again, under the auspices economic setup of a public bank, we'll be able to do just about anything we want. Money won't be an object.
All right, so I have one final question for you, and today I guess you could say this is simple. So, even though it's very early on before 2022, 4 years go by pretty quickly. 2 years goes by pretty quickly. We saw during the prior administration, 4 years just seems like yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. so, during that time, as you see forward, where do you think New Mexico is going to be? And as governor, when you help everyone, especially as you're running as an independent, you know, how do you propose getting the state legislature, which is overwhelmingly Democrat, and let's just say hypothetically they turn Republican in the next election, how would you work with them to get things done? And when you do get things done, where will you see New Mexico go forward and be the land of enchantment?
if I actually make it into office, and there's some different circumstances and conditions which could present that idea. Um, I think there's excessive. Any criminality is wrong. There's a lot of criminality that may well be prosecuted in the next while. Those individuals that seem like they may be a challenge to New Mexico rebirthing itself, as I would suggest it. Um, Finding unity, uh, and again, the focus of that is on what's the best way forward for children. How do we make better education? How do we make better schools, better health? And it all comes back to that. So that's the focus. The unity idea is very important. I do believe I'll call my organization the Unity Coalition, and we'll start to build bridges first. If I'm the right guy for the job, great. We'll put all our votes behind that and other candidates that meet our criteria. Uh, Again, I wasn't accepted into the independent party because I'm a little too independent apparently for that. The next step for me is to start circulating. I guess you call it a petitions, really, to get myself on the ballot. It only takes 1,500 names, and we've probably got to do 10 times that much because we'll throw them out just because they can, and they'll try to damage me any possible way they can. I'm an easy target. There's a lot of things about me that could be severely criticized, but the vision is something that can't be criticized, and that's the only thing that I will bring to the table as the governor, is to, again, find the answers and implement them.
Mr. Gordon, I really enjoyed our conversation
Oh,
here,
my
and
pleasure.
thank you for your time. And hopefully, it's still a long time, but hopefully, we get a lot of discussion on the table and a lot of interesting topics to go over. And I thank you again. So,
Well, the campaign starts now, Freddie. Thank you so much for giving me a platform where none other exists, and you're doing a great work as a self-appointed citizen journalist. I don't think there's a greater calling in this time. Um, so important to get the word out and explain to folks what's really going on, and give a platform to people like myself, or a little different, a lot different, and but again, we're in last place on everything, and that's a situation that will not stand.
mm-hmm. Yes, it will. So I hope we can have another great conversation.
Indeed.
But I think I will call it a day here. And
Mm-hmm.
thank you to everybody who's watching. Um, we will have another episode soon. Hopefully, we can have some more people to talk about the issues. And this has been the Shining Light podcast. And we'll see you around. And we'll bring you nothing but the truth, the whole truth, and just the truth.
All right.
All right.
Thank you so much, Freddie. Good night.
Good night.